Y'all, thank you again to Mayor Nichols. That was a great talk, and we are going to move directly into our next panel. We will impanel them, which verb I like, that's sort of like impale. So everybody can come up who's on the next panel, and I'm going to tell you, while people are coming up, we've got a number of examples of great marriages here. One is Mayor Nichols, who brought Sharon here for her birthday, and they're going out tonight. And the other one is the moderator for our next panel. Jonathan Kempner was not originally supposed to be moderating this panel. His wife, Lisa Van Susteren, was. And Lisa, about a week ago, fell off of a stool and broke her finger, and had to have surgery, seriously broke her finger, and could not make it. And she was really distressed about it and concerned that she was letting us down. And so I got a distressed phone call from her, and I finally got her, and she said, "I've got a great idea." She said, "My husband can be the moderator," and whom we didn't know, and now we do know him. But I thought that was a wonderful testament of, confidence and admiration, which is what a good marriage ought to be all about. So we have Jonathan Kempner, who will be moderating the panel. He's the president of Tiger 21, which is a peer-to-peer learning group for high net worth investors. He was formerly the president and chief executive officer for the Mortgage Bankers Association based in Washington. And he has served on their board and was vice president of Oxford Development Corporation and held a number of other similar positions. He is a graduate of the University of Michigan and then Stanford Law School. And by all accounts, at least from Lisa's point of view, he's a superb moderator. So thank you, Jonathan, for being willing to do this.
Thanks, Dana. I appreciate it. So I present to you the dream team of environmentalists, with one exception, and that would be me. Dana just told you about my wife. We're going to pop up some pictures. Do we have it? All right. This is Lisa yesterday after 3 hours of surgery. Oh, put that back if you can. All right.
Give me a second.
All right, we'll get back to that. She pleaded with her surgeon. This is the surgeon for the New York Yankees, literally in the Knickerbockers in New York, and asked if she could sneak away after the operation and fly down last night. And he said, absolutely no way. So plan B was to bring the ball boy. So here I am. Now, I feel like some of you maybe saw the commercial where the panini delivery guy in the TV commercial who is administering acupuncture to the patient. When confronted with the question of why he was doing it, he throws up his hands and says, "I don't know, but I stayed at a Holiday Inn Express last night." So I'm your panini delivery guy. This was Lisa yesterday about 4 o'clock after 3 hours of surgery on her hand. My comment is there's a double pillow on her hand. Looks like when our dog had an operation and had one of those collars. And then this is Lisa just 2 hours later. There are two things you should know. She was just released from the hospital, which is why she's dancing, but more importantly, she's heavily medicated. And my daughter was with her. So, since you all have access to the biographies, what I want to do is just introduce our panelists briefly. They're the all-stars speaking on the issue of answering the climate crisis. But let me tell you one or two facts about them that you will not find in your bios. First up is Amy Salzman, the Kobe Bryant of environmental law professors, who teaches at New York University Law School. Little known fact, growing up in Greenwich Village, Amy had a pet monkey and goat, giving new meaning to the concept that New York is made up of strange animals. Next will be Tom Peterson, the Larry Bird of environmental strategists. Tom is the founder, president, and CEO of the Center for Climate Strategies. Little known fact, Tom was literally an All-American soccer player in 6th grade, playing for the U.S. boys national team against Canada. Following Tom will be Bob Perkowitz, the Magic Johnson of environmental entrepreneurs. Bob is the founder and president of Eco America. Little known fact, Bob is literally a world-class cyclist, having ridden across 5 continents. He also should be in the Guinness Book of World Records for having the most resilient tush in the world, having ridden his bike across 5 continents. Our final panelist will be the Honorable Bob Inglis, the LeBron James of environmentally enlightened Republicans, bravely proving that is not an oxymoron. Bob is a former U.S. Congressman from South Carolina and is presently the Executive Director of the Energy and Enterprise Initiative at George Mason University. Little known fact, Bob is a collector of living creatures. He has 5 children, 14 chickens, 3 horses, 2 cats, 4 dogs, which by my count totals to 28, although it is noteworthy that there are no Salzman monkeys or Greenwich Village goats. On that interesting note, let me dig in. Our format is that each panelist will have 12 minutes for his or her initial comments, and then we'll follow it with questions and answers. I'm a firm believer in enforcing time guidelines, so I'm setting my timer to 12 minutes for each of them, with the following social stigma when any of them goes over. Let's see. All right, so with that, Amy, you have 12 minutes.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. New York City really is the concrete jungle. I can vouch for that. And I'm just in awe. Am I in the right place for the mic? Can you hear me? Move it up? Okay. I am so in awe of everything I've heard this morning. That first panel are essentially the pantheon of environmental doers and thinkers. And then to hear all about the community level work that's been done. I mean, the leadership in this room is just spectacular. And being a recovering Washingtonian, having spent the last 3 years, well, the last 25 years living there, but the last 3 years in the bubble known as the White House, it is so refreshing to be out where work really gets done and people really care and can work together. I'm going to try very hard to take Stephen Rockefeller's words to heart. I'm trying to live my life in a new way of thinking. And though I think one of the things that we need to do is figure out how to build the kind of models and partnerships and positive relationships that we've heard about this morning to the national level, because truth be told, we're not going to solve the climate problem at the local level. And I think Mayor Nichols was absolutely right. We learn our lessons from them. They are our laboratories, but we do need leadership at the topmost levels in Washington. I guess I'm going to talk a little bit about how everyone thinks they're an environmentalist. All the polling, and I think again the first panel discussed this. Pretty much everybody in this country thinks they're an environmentalist. No one's against clean air or clean water, but climate change is a harder problem. Climate change, especially when we talk about things like the threat of climate change, we have unfortunately given power to the opponents for action on climate change, who are able to come up with much more tangible threats from the regulation of carbon emitting gas, of carbon change. Climate change, excuse me. People then are being faced with a regulation that they are told will limit their ability to drive in cars. It will limit their ability to either cool or heat their homes. They like inexpensive food. So for them, the threat frame has, I think, flipped the wrong way. I think all of our arguments, and I appreciate the question that was made this morning about why don't we talk about all the bad stuff. I think the problem is the bad stuff is much more tangible on the impacts of climate regulation right now. And I think that so many people, including perhaps even the leadership in Washington, sees those little numbers going by at the gas station and sees the number on the cash register at the grocery store going up, 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 up. And the connection, the threat of climate regulation making that worse is somehow more real to them. And even though they're environmentalists, the choices that they're making with their pocketbooks and with their concern about safety and education. Unfortunately, we just don't make it to the top level at all. And I just want to talk a little bit about the stuff we did in the White House because it reminded me of so much that I heard this morning. The administration is kind of a family. It's kind of a microcosm of the world. You have the Environmental Protection Agency, the Department of the Interior, you've got NOAA on the sort of green team side. Then you've got the Department of Commerce, you've got transportation and housing and urban development. But one of the things that happened almost immediately in this administration was something we called the Green Cabinet, and it was the popular kid table. Everyone wanted to be there. And one of the first things that we did that really reminded me of what we talked about this morning was the president signed an executive order that we called the Sustainability Order that actually ordered the federal family to start walking the walk. And among the mandates in that executive order was a 30% reduction of vehicle greenhouse gas emissions by 2020, 25% in water efficiency, and specifically 28% overall direct greenhouse gas emission reductions and a 13% indirect greenhouse gas emissions reductions. That was the first time that ever happened with real numbers and real targets, and each and every agency, the same way that we heard about communities working together, each agency had to come up with their own plan. They had to embrace their own target, so they owned it. And then they had to go public with scorecards that are on the internet. And they were both proud and embarrassed by what was on those scorecards. So I'm not here to apologize. I mean, I'm not an apologist for the administration. I think a lot of good things have happened. I think we need to do a whole lot more. And one of the things that we need to do is figure out how to create a community that is as vibrant and supportive as the communities that you've all discussed this morning. And one thing that I found startling is when I first started working at the Council on Environmental Quality, I sat down with an old friend, Russ Train, who was the first chair of CEQ, and asked him how he would do things back in the day. He was a Nixon Republican, let's not forget. And he told me this amazing story that his wife, Aline, would bring food in from their farm on the Eastern Shore and walk door to door on Capitol Hill and share it. That was the magic that worked 35 years ago. And that's the magic that is clearly working in this room. And the real question for me is how we get that to start happening again in Washington. We need to build David's full spectrum community all the way up. And clearly what's happening here has to be models. But I think we need to start being more aggressive in Washington to bring in the spectrum. The environmental community, in my view, cannot carry the weight of accomplishing regulations to limit greenhouse gases on their own. They have done, I think, a very good job of building what we call unconventional allies. We have, as Stephen was discussing this morning, the faith community has a real stake in regulations to limit greenhouse gases. People in the health community, Moms for Clean Air, they have a real stake in doing the right thing for our environment. Some pension fund advisors have realized that they have a real stake in making sure that their rate of return and their fiduciary responsibilities to their pensioners is met, and that climate is a threat to that. We have the incredible work of the mayors that is all speaking to that. But I think what we really need to do is rather than imposing our agenda on these other important political stakeholders, we need to be creative and find ways for them to embrace our agenda and therefore become champions of it themselves. That means letting go a little bit, which is something that we in the environmental community are not so comfortable doing. But I think the notion of empowering our sometimes allies and equipping them with the information that they need to become champions in their own right is the only way that we're going to change the dynamic in Washington. Well, not to deny the fact that grassroots activism is also very helpful. I would tier all of these things together, not one or the other. Because as we've discussed this morning, the problem is fundamentally an economic problem. It's something that is very challenging for environmentalists who come to the problem because we care from our hearts, we care from our feminine side, or I was going to say the Dionysian side as opposed to the Apollonian side. It's really amazing how we're all kind of thinking about these things the same way. And as Dana said in the most recent newsletter for CCL, we need to find enlightened self-interest in all of these other groups, which means we need to make it real. And one thing that's making it real are these natural disasters. I moved to New York just in time for Sandy to hit. And I have to say, it was startling to see New York City, at least south of 34th Street, which is where I lived, on its knees. Two worlds, developed, undeveloped, powerful, unpowerful, literally and figuratively. And I think that the concept of resilience that also we've talked a whole lot about this morning creates a real opportunity for us to learn the importance of human communities and natural communities and their interactions with each other. And I think that the $60 billion with a B in recovery money that the federal government appropriated for Sandy relief, some $20 billion of which the president earmarked for what he called mitigation projects, which are really building resilience projects, is an incredibly powerful story to make. That money is being charged to be spent by local communities to make them more resilient to the impacts of climate change. He gets it, and he's spending money where it matters. And that $60 billion speaks volumes to the economic costs of inaction. So I think what I'm learning from you is that we need to replicate what you all are doing at all levels of society and of our politics. And if we do it with the right partners, we will gain our political voice and our political power. We may be able to change the economics if we're smart about it and if we have real stories that people can relate to, so that they're not just seeing the little dollar signs on their gas meters going by, which should say don't drive, but instead it says get mad at our elected officials because gas shouldn't be expensive. I think that really that's what we need to do. And I believe, I am an optimist, that when we get the right people on our side, and that we will find ways to do that because we're creative and we have great connections and we are very, very smart, we will have appropriate action at the national and international level. And I'm just going to quote President Kennedy from 50 years ago, who President Obama was quoting at one of the graduation speeches last weekend in Ohio. He said, "Our problems are man-made, therefore they can be solved by man and women." So our task is large, but I really think that there are incredibly buildable, scalable models in both directions. So I will stop. Did I make it in 12 minutes?
You did.
Yes.
57 seconds left. Tom, you're up next.